Hey everyone, this is Light, and welcome to a long-awaited RTA tier list video, and oh boy, a lot has changed. If this is your first time watching my tier list videos, I'll go over the tiers real quick. So basically, S Plus are the most broken units in the game, and they are all worth slamming as first pick or even pre-banning. Meanwhile, in S tier are units that are really strong with little weaknesses that you pick alongside the S Plus tier. For A tier, we have situational counter picks that typically work very well when picked properly. For A minus tier, it's basically the same, but these units will be picked much less often to give you an idea of what you should prioritize. As for B tier, these units are just not good enough or not reliable enough, and I do not recommend building them for RTA in the current state. As for cleave units, I put them in a separate tier because I believe there's no point ranking cleave units, because if the playstyle is strong, then the units are strong. And cleave is pretty strong right now. So with all that said, let's get into it. And oh boy, let's start with the S plus tier. So we have Harsetti. Harsetti is everything you don't want her to be. She is a game warping DPS. And she just enables a very toxic playstyle that I'm sure everyone is familiar with now, that involves building all your units or building second copies of units to be base speed to abuse Harsetti's passive, in which everyone is the same speed except she's 10% faster. And what this means, so basically, let's say you know, you're just playing RTA, you first pick your Death Dealer Ray, who is you know, a normal Death Dealer Ray with 230 speed, and the other person, you don't know this, but they picked two units that are base speed, and you're like, oh, okay, let's play like Laya and Crimson Armin, and your Laya is 260 speed, by the way, and then out of nowhere they slam Harsetti. They slam their base speed Harsetti. And guess what? Your Laya and Death Dealer Ray just lost over 200 as equip score worth of stats because the guy slammed his base speed Harsetti. And his first two picks were base speed units. So he's lost nothing, while you have just lost 200 some equip score for every normal unit that you just picked. And that is completely game breaking, and people are abusing it in a way that is so disgusting. For example, top Korean player KJ, he has a base speed DDR that he picks when Harsetti is available, and then he has a fast DDR that he picks when Harsetti is pre-banned. It's absolutely disgusting and very, very strong and viable. If you've touched Arena or Guild War lately, you should know how insanely broken Harsetti is. She is absolutely game-breaking, game-changing, and she makes people farm for a new type of gear. And she's just crazy. She's absolutely crazy. Her build flexibility is really good. She could be high damage, she could be injury, she could be 200 some effectiveness with Abyssal Crown. She is everything. She is the future of E7. So yeah, very, very good unit. Definitely easy S plus tier. She's crazy. So yeah, then we have Luna. You know, Luna is Luna. She has the best debuffs in the game. She has a very toxic spammable S2. She's really, really strong for cleave, aggro, anything that abuses books. She's really strong in standard play because you force the other person to pick cleansers, and no cleansers can really keep up with her tempo. So yeah, very, very toxic unit, very game warping, pretty much best S3 in the game. So yeah, decent unit. Also, base speed Luna with Harsetti is disturbingly broken, but who would have thought? Anyway, then we have Emo Poly. Still insanely strong. Her passive stops a lot of units from being picked, and she makes A Tywin the best unit in the game. However, it's slightly harder to pick her unless you pre-ban Harsetti. However, Base speed Emopologist will do fine when Harsetti is available, or you can pick her with Harsetti and you can play like a fast Harsetti with her. Up to you, there's a lot of options. And then we have Emo Ilinav. This unit, again, the second most recent MO5, and she is completely game breaking. Because she stops half the cast from being picked. For example, we had to knock down Emo Haste and Emo Senya and Alaya from S+ tier just because Ilinav exists. When Ilinav is on the table, you do not dare pick any of these units, and she is increasingly becoming a popular pre-ban so that people can play normally again. So yeah, Ilinav, very strong. She's a DPS, she's mitigation, she gives defense buff that's unstrippable, and she's a cleanser. She is insane. DPSs that are also cleansers are very insane. See Laya. So yeah, very good unit, very good unit. BBK is the best DPS in the game. She is the stickiest DPS. She does the most damage. She's very hard to kill. And well, what I mean by sticky is that she has 2 immortalities. She has a lot of healing. She could be on an evasion artifact, and she could just resist everything you throw at her. Her biggest counters are debuffs, but if you miss your debuffs, you are screwed. And if you get defense broken one time into a BBK combo, you are also screwed. She is very strong and menacing. She will probably terrorize your ladder experience for like, I don't know, the entire season. Yeah, very strong. Death Dealer Ray, he is the same as always. He does a lot of damage, he makes his team do a lot of damage, he puts you to sleep so you don't get to play. And yeah, he's very hard to counter. Selene is not a real counter to him. And cleansers do not counter him. He's just insanely hard to deal with unless you kind of just like try to murder him right off the bat. And he's also a really good healer with Guardian Ice Crystals, and he has 3 viable builds. You could be Giga Tanky with Guardian Crystal, you could be very high effectiveness, you could be very high ER, or you could be base speed and be the best unit in the game with Harsetti. So yeah, very strong unit. And we have a Tywin, best knight in the game. Debuffs are a huge issue, and any sort of cleanse is valuable. A Tywin has probably the easiest to proc cleanse for how effective it is. So he's pretty essential. He's one of the only counter picks to Knockwall, if any. So yeah, and his defense break and stun are incredibly enabling, and he's also very strong with ML Poly and Death Dealer Ray. So yeah, crazy unit, best knight in the game by far. He can be either fast with effectiveness or protection set Aureus. Very good. So yeah, that's all for the S+ tier. Now let's look at the S tier. So we had to knock down Emo Haste, Senya, and Laya, like I said, just because of Emo Ilinav. Haste, yeah, you can't pick Haste anymore if Ilinav is on the table. However, if you pick Ilinav yourself or pre-banner, Haste is still very strong. Same thing for Senya. These units stop your team from dying, and they punish the other person for hurting you. Pre-ban Ilinav and pick Senya is extremely popular right now because Senya has tons of synergy with the undying units. And yeah, Emo Haste pretty much the same, but Senya is a bit popular. Yeah, Emo Haste is Emo Haste still, as long as Ilinav is not on the table. Same thing with Senya. You know, just punish these 2 units. They go hand in hand. They punish the other person for you know, touching your team. And yeah, they're both very strong units. I'm kind of grading them like the same because they are very similar. However, a lot of people, and Senya is used a lot more in Cleave these days because she kind of stops you from picking counter attackers because you're gonna proc her and then she's gonna blow you up with 3F damage. But yeah, these anchors, they're still very strong so long as Ilinav is not on the table. And then we have Laya. Laya is still one of the better cleansers in the game. However, we had to knock her down because if Illinev is on the table and you don't have the Illinev, you can only pick Laya as a cleanser, and as a cleanser, Laya loses like half of her value. Laya's value is being a cleanser and a time bomb. But if she loses her time bomb part of her kit, that's kind of sad. She's as much weaker when Illinev is on the table. And for that reason, Mediator is up a tier, because when Laya is not on the table, there aren't many cleansers, so there's a need for him to come back. Basically, yeah, he cleanses, he gives attack buff, he gives immunity, he does decent damage. He's basically, he's a lesser version of Laya for sure, but he's not weak to Illinev, which is a huge plus. However, he is very weak to Knockwall though, which is to be noted. Now, if you pick Laya, even though Illinev is available, it's just to be resistant to Knockwall, if anything. But yeah, Hand Guy, he is good again. He is definitely good again. Amiki is basically another version of BBK. However, I think she is much weaker than BBK, because BBK has the capability of wiping an entire team so long as you set her up with a defense break. However, Amiki can't do the same thing. Amiki is more of like a wait and see unit. Like, you pick Amiki and then you try to like whittle the other team down enough for Amiki to 1v4, but you don't do the same thing with BBK. Amiki is a very different character in which she cleans up. Basically, Amiki can't solo the team, but she can clean up pretty well. Yeah, she's actually very strong, and she's also resistant to. She's very resistant to debuffers. Like, she can't get sealed. But yeah, decent unit. Very strong neutral pick DPS. Alencia is kind of just what this meta needs. She is a bruiser. She's very tanky. She has a strip. She has defense buff. Defense buff is very nice for surviving. She has injury. She's just a very nice bruiser for the meta. Her only problem is lacking cleanse, and yeah, biggest issue is lacking cleanse. But yeah, you're gonna have to support her with other units for that. But again, she's very strong in this meta. And then we have C. Lilius. C. Lilius is slightly worse because of Harsetti. However, she is still one of the best aggressive options in the game. Like vigor and dual attacks, you can't really go wrong still. But again, slightly weaker because of Harsetti kind of messing with like the speed tuning and whatnot. However, if you pre-ban Harsetti, that all goes away. Then we have Landy. So Landy C. Lilius is still a decent draft. However, it's a bit harder to play with Harsetti, and Amiki kind of beats Landy up, but Landy is still very strong. However, you just can't build drafts around Landy anymore because she's too easy to kill these days. Like, Emma Illinev removes her anchors. So if you ever play Landy, she's still really strong. See, Lilius and Landy are still really strong, but you just can never have Landy be your sole DPS, basically. But otherwise, still very strong. She can win games on a whim, and she can also lose them. But she also protects you from a lot of shenanigans. But yeah, still a decent unit, not as strong as before. And same thing for Lua. So Lua is tied to basically how good Laya is. And like, you never want to pick these units without each other. And because Laya cannot be picked as often anymore because of Illinev, that means Lua cannot be picked as often anymore. But if the stars align and like Illinev is pre-banned, or you take Illinev, Laya, and Lua, it's pretty decent. Then we have Knockwall. Knockwall is probably the best debuffer in the game. Like, the skill reset and the seal is just absolutely This is absolutely toxic to deal with. She has very few actual counters that actually work. Like Laya is her best counter. A Taiwan is a soft counter, I'd say. Bunny Dom is a soft counter. She doesn't. I don't think Nagwa has a true counter. Like, and like even like DPS like Vivian, she resets Vivian to slow her down. I don't think Nagwa actually has a true counter. But only soft counters, and she's just really strong. Her debuffs and her skill reset altogether is really hard to deal with. Like, no matter what. And she's also really strong in like cleave, she'll be in anything aggressive. Defense break knockout artifact is also very good because of BBK, so yeah. Insane unit. Nothing can properly cleanse her besides Laya. Then we have Yufine. Yufine has made quite the comeback. Yufine is best friends with ML Ilinav because ML Ilinav removes all her counters. Like, Yufine can no longer get dunked by Stenya and Haste and Janua because Ilinav makes them do no damage, and Indomitable makes Yufine do way more damage. So Yufine best bruiser, probably best bruiser in the game right now because of Ilinav. And she's also really good to fight cleave with. Oh yeah, insane unit. Zio is pretty decent in like any sort of like aggro play and cleave because he counters A Taiwan. He removes A Taiwan's passive, and that's a huge threat. Because then Zio can also lead into knockwall and whatnot, and honestly he's decent to have for slow players too, because there will be a handful of freaks who try to cleave without Zio prevent, and yeah, that's when you can punish them. So yeah, Zio definitely a decent pick still. Moon Bunny is very flexible. You can just use her to soft counter Death Dealer Ray and knockwall. But also you can use her to reverse cleave people by being fast and having the soul artifact, and you can take advantage of her with like Soulburn Fire Ravi or like Soulburn Roy and something like that. You know, she's just decently flexible. Could be a protective unit or it could be a very aggressive unit. No, yeah, decent unit. Albedo. So Albedo and C Armin are basically the best mitigations in the game. Albedo's 20% crit damage mitigation, you stack that with Aureus, you stack it with protection set. She makes things very hard to kill, and if you have a 3F for her, she becomes a very decent damage dealer. And then we have C Armin, like the best overall mitigation in the game. Aureus, and then her passive reduces all damage, and her S3 protects bruisers like Yufine really well. Oh yeah, really good mitigation. And then we have AOL. So Angel of Light, she's probably the best unbuffable option in the game, and that's essential against the BVK. AOL might be one of the most reliable BVK counters in the game. However, you can also just miss her divas, but yeah, she's very protective. The cleanse is very nice, the skill note is very nice, and then the reverse with like the unbuffable and the silence is very good for turning a game around. Good build diversity, could be very tanky, could be very high effectiveness, honestly very good unit to have two of. Very strong unit still. And the last unit for S tier is actually going to be Bellion. I just forgot to move her. 3F Bellion plus Death Dealer Ray is probably one of the best combos in the game right now. Like, it just does so much damage. The 3F can potentially proc 8 times on Bellion's turn, and she can double proc Venom and explode it with DDR. And that's enough damage to just completely wipe people. And her passive is very protective too. Like, she has so much synergy with DDR because people like to pick Celine, and with Bellion they can no longer soulburn their Celine to kill anything. So very good DPS. However, you do need the limited artifact, and She is a bit weaker without DDR, but otherwise, insane unit. Absolutely insane unit for this meta that requires DPS to be very tanky. So yeah, that's it for the S tier. And let's take a look at the A tier. So Sage Vivian, she's pretty much the only unit in the game that's actually completely immune to debuffs. However, she is weak to skill reset and strips, I must say. But being immune to debuffs itself is very, very valuable in this debuff heavy meta. So yeah, a lot of potential for her. Cause like someone slams DDR a tie with knockball, you can just slam Vivian into them. Very strong unit. And Gala is still very strong so long as Ilinav is not on the table. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, super strong still. Just need to not be fighting Ilinav, or you can pick Ilinav yourself. Ilinav C Lilius with Gala is a very strong combo. Then we have Strays. Strays and Leica are kind of the same unit, and Gala to some extent. Like these three units, they one-shot something, but they also need Ilinav to not be on the table. Like they one-shot something, but the difference between these units is that Leica can choose her target, Strays does more damage but you can't choose the target, and Gala has more longevity in the game, as in Gala is more than just a one and done unit. Like she's a consistent DPS, and these two are very one and done. But yeah, they're decent units to have built still. Arya has to be one of the singular most threatening units to be picked late in the draft, because if you pick Arya well, you basically never lose. If you get value out of her S3 and like you counterattack once or twice, the other person is gonna get wiped. Like as long as you set her up well, you almost never will lose with Arya. She's just that good when picked well. But yeah, super good into people lacking AoE, of course, and you know, strippers. Then we have Bryceria. She's unbuffable, she's anti-revive, she's defense break, she's very good with BBK especially. She has good build diversity, she could be DPS, she could be, you know, high effectiveness, she could be high ER so she doesn't get debuffed. But yeah, decently flexible unit. Lot of ways to use her. And then we have Celine. Celine, the premier unit for non-attack skills. She's strong, but she has a decent amount of counterplay. However, if you pick her in a way to, you know, as long as you pick her well, she'll always have value. I feel like the biggest mistake people make with Celine is picking her way too early, and then the other person just has way too much room to counterplay her. But a well-picked Celine is very threatening. And then we have Sharon. Sharon is a soft counter to DDR. However, you must be very aggressive with Sharon and capitalize on her defense break. That is the only way Sharon is good, basically. You pick her against DDR, in which case you would try to kill him really fast with like BBK and capitalize on the defense breaks, because Sharon, even though she cleanses sleep, she can't fix the injury, so in the long game she just completely loses out. But yeah, inherently very aggressive unit and a soft counter to DDR. Very decent. Emma Bologna, she's one of the only reliable counters to Candy, pretty much. But that's pretty much all she is right now. Just a safe answer to Candy for slower players, basically. Nothing too crazy. Politis, also another go-to non-attack skill unit. She's very good for cleave. She's very good for slow players. She has a lot of build diversity. She could be full damage. She could be very high ER, high effectiveness. Yeah, very good for slowing down people's tempo with the CR cut and like the unbuffable and blind. Particularly good against ML Poly if they don't have a Tywin. Good against Bunny Dom, good against Frida. Yeah, overall decent unit. Very, very, very solid unit. Emma Rowana. Emma Rowana is mostly a cleave unit, but you can also pick her with other control units like Knockwall. Like Knockwall plus Emma Rowana, it's like a double reset, and like it's very hard to come back from that. She also has defense break to capitalize on she also has defense break to enable units that that just kill with defense break like BBK, so that's nice. Green Rowana, if Green Rowana is picked well against Candy, it's actually very hard to lose with her. But that's kind of the only use honestly for her right now. Decent against some things like Emerald Bologna, but yeah, she's basically only used as a candy counter right now, and that's decent enough. Acades, I have a lot to say about this unit. Unfortunately, she is the best counter to Emerald Luna, because there's no other cleanser that can match her cycling, and she has 3 cleanses. Basically, like you can S2, you can S3, and then you can S2 again, which is very, very valuable. She is the only cleanser that can kind of match Emo Luna, which is crazy. But yeah, she's definitely decent. Ocean Breeze Luluka, really good against Sea Lilius because the defense buff and the debuffs slow down Sea Lilius's tempo, and slowing down Sea Lilius is the best way to beat her. So Luluka very good as long as Sea Lilius is good. Emoshu, decent injury unit. However, the Emoshu is she's only for like killing people who picked all tanks basically, but she kind of folds against BBK, Candy, and AU Fiend, which is why she's down here. Like she kind of just dies to raw damage. But against all tanks, she's really good. And pretty much the second best injury unit in the game. And we have LQC. LQC is pretty much the premier anti-dark unit. Aiden is not that good, but yeah, LQC is the premier anti-dark unit as long as Ilinav is not on the table. And her cheat mitigation is pretty nice too. Yeah, that's about it. Fire Ada is actually really good. The defense break makes her inherently aggressive, but also the pushback, the unbuffable, the silence makes her very defensive too. And if you build a fast Ada, you can cheese cleavers by cutting them with guide to a decision. So she's very flexible, and she's like a different version of AOL. So yeah, very good. Fire Ravi, she's the best fire bruiser in the game, technically, because there's a lack of other bruisers. So yeah, she's got that going for her, but she's not very good unless you pick her with ML Poly or anything that can make her dual attack. Otherwise, she just kind of stands still too much. But hey, she is the best fire bruiser in the game if you need a fire bruiser. And then we have Ed. Ed has some spots where he is irreplaceable. He gets memed a lot for like resisting and stuff, but usually when Ed is a good pick, he's a really good pick, and there's nothing else that can really match him. Yeah, and definitely a very decent unit. Yeah, like against cleavers, against people who are forced to debuff, he's definitely a decent unit. And we have Fire Araminta. She's one of the best debuffers in the game, for sure. She can stun people a lot. She cycles a lot. She goes S2, S3, you know, that's like 8 chances to proc Abyssal Crown. However, she does kind of need Illinev to not be on the table because Illinev just cuts her. Man, one of the better debuffers in the game. I feel like she kind of replaced the Solitaria and Fairy Tail Tenebria as a debuffer. I feel like her debuffs are just slightly more consistent, but yeah. Overall decent debuffer. Blue Elena, really good against AoE cleave basically. If you have Doctor's Bag, her S2 will cleanse a debuff. And then if you pair her with A Tywin and AOL, they will also cleanse an extra debuff. So basically you can fully stop Rand from debuffing you, which is really nice. Abigail's buff made her quite good, to be honest. She gives a unit immortality and cleanses them, and that's a lot of synergy with like the current immortality units. Like imagine BBK and Amiki with 3 immortalities. That's the kind of thing Abigail enables, and it's really good. Definitely really good. And she has defense break as like a cherry on top, which is super great. Then we have Arbiter Vildred. This unit, if the other person doesn't pick tanky enough, RB just kind of completely wipes them. Basically, if Arbiter Vildred gets 2 turns, like 1 turn from his natural speed, and then 1 turn from reviving, he's gonna just kill the other person. He does a lot of damage, and he's also really, really good with Harsetti. Because like, he can just be base speed and infinite damage. They're very, very strong DPS right now. He's in the club with like BBK, Amiki, as like DPS that do a lot of damage without dying. And yeah, and here's Janua. Janua is an absolute bum now. Janua is basically a unit that you only pick to counter Aufine when Illinev is not on the table. That is what Janua has been reduced to, and it's pretty sad. But yeah, it can't be helped. He's weak to debuffs, he's weak to a lot of things. He's weak to being out tanked. And he's just not that good right now, unfortunately. And Dillivet surprisingly is actually very, very strong with Harsetti. Because you can build her to do tons of damage and just kind of cleave the other person while cleansing you and pushing your team up. She has very, very good utility in Harsetti kind of games. Like with and against Harsetti. And then that's it for the A tier. And oh boy, now we have the A- tier. So these units, they're decent, but they're also hard to pick. Lionheart Servia. Honestly, Lionheart Servia is not that great. You kind of have to set her up with defense break. And you also have to make sure the other person can't really kill you, but if you can get her going, she's pretty decent with Illinev. As long as you can get her going, she's a decent unit. But it's very hard to pick her unless you're cleaving with defense break. Man, she's decent. And we have Dark Corvus. Sometimes when the star aligns and the other person doesn't pick injury and they pick AoE units that just kind of get 1v4'd by Dark Corvus, he's pretty good. He has 1v4 potential. Brigida, sometimes the other person will solo DPS with like candy or something. And then Brigida just kind of, beats them up. But that's about it. She's good into people playing solo DPS drafts basically. A-Ravi is the kind of unit where you're like, I want an injury unit, but also I want a unit that doesn't die, but also I want a unit that can revive. And in that case, A-Ravi is pretty decent for that. And we have DJ Bazaar. So DJB is a unit that's like, he's good when pay rate gets picked, but also you're not getting cleaved by Emo Rowana. Like, let's say the other person picks like an opener that's 300 speed and then they slam Payra for some reason, then boom, DJB is a really good pick. Very rare scenario though. Then we have Eden. Okay, Eden technically is the biggest mitigation in the game, but usually you don't need that much mitigation and you would prefer the utility of Albedo and C Armin. But sometimes the only thing you need is a unit that tanks all the damage for you. And yeah, technically Eden has 30% Aureus, and then he can hold Adamant Shield to make him the biggest mitigation in the game technically. And his protection set is fatter than anyone else's because of his passive. So yeah, he is a thing if you feel like C Armin is not enough for you. Christy is a decent unit in kind of like ER cheeses pretty much. But besides that, not too much use for her. But you can pick her to make sure your cleanser doesn't get debuffed by something high effectiveness basically. There are shenanigans you can do with like Mort Artifact Christie to like reduce the cooldown of Gallo or something, but yeah, nothing special. Nothing really that special. Elvira is actually good when the other person's win condition is to press Yuffie in S3. That's it. That's the only condition Elvira is good. Do not pick her against Candy, you will die. And then we have Destina. Destina is just like the classic Soul Weaver, but sometimes she can out heal people, but most of the time she doesn't. She actually just doesn't keep up with the healing. Like sometimes if the other person doesn't have many debuffers and all you have to do is survive and heal, Destina's a thing, but you also need Guardian Crystal for that. She's okay. Emma Ball is decent at cutting cleavers who don't pick cleansers like Emma Senya. And if you have AU Fiend or Fire Politics, but that's about it. Emma Ball is okay for cutting some cleavers, that's about it. The Fairy Tale Tenebria, if you need to debuff someone who doesn't really have any cleansers, she's nice for it. She's nice for it, but she's a little unreliable considering if the other person has Bastion of Perlucia, she will miss half of her debuffs guaranteed. But she's okay. Hua Young has potential to kill some things. She does roughly like 20,000 damage before mitigation, and some people are in kill range of that, but a lot of people are too tanky for that to matter. But sometimes she's decent. So sometimes there will be something that she can just kick and kill. Lethe is a decent counter to like the solo Landy drafts basically. But that's kind of it. Her kill range is a bit too low. And she's really weak to injury. But she will beat the solo Candy drafts. As long as you protect her. Spectre Tenebria is good when the other person doesn't have AoEs and she can survive long enough. No AoEs and she can survive basically. I don't think she's very good otherwise because her tempo is kind of weak. The games don't really last long enough for her to stack souls and then just like go to town on people anymore. But yeah, she's sometimes okay. Basar is one of the only ignore ER unbuffables in the game, and sometimes that's all you need to win a game against like some big F-res player. Sometimes a green Basar Soulburn is all you need to win a game pretty much. Rimuru is really good at against people, stacking buffs. He's typically picked against Gala Lilius as like a decent counter pick. Yeah, he's really good at that. Man, that's kind of about it. Then we have Shoutier. Shoutier is something. She's the only unit with 100% evasion hit chance in the game. So like if for some reason killing an evasion unit is your win con, Shoutier is the go-to. Aiden is... She used to be like an anti-dark unit. She still kind of is. But she's weak to all like the white damage dealers in this. It's like she's weak to Senya, she's weak to Haste, she's weak to Amiki. She's kind of weak to a lot of things. She's weak to DDR. Yeah, Aiden's just not as great anymore, but if for some reason you need like an anti-dark unit and Ilinev's not on the table, like Aiden's okay, not the best. Not the best though. Last piece, Karen. If you have a 300 speed Karen and you want to like gear gap some people and one shot their knockballs, go for it. She's okay, but sometimes that's not enough to win you the game either. She's okay. We have Roy. Roy is kind of decent with Soul Artifact Bunny Dom or like Frida. But very rarely is someone actually gonna die to Roy, because like they'll have like Senya or like Ilinev or whatever or Haste. But yeah, sometimes people will just straight up die to Roy. He's okay for that situation. Karina. Sometimes people will have like go like a pure damage cleave, like lack of debuffs. Like Karina is weak to like Ran Payra and all that. But sometimes cleavers who don't pick debuffers, they can die to Karina, kinda. Ruel is okay against like a lot of single target damage, and she can just like out heal them and like just revive. Other than that, not really. Pirate Flan, she has potential to be built extremely high effectiveness to deal with high ER players because of her 50 free effectiveness, but she's not that pickable. She's very squishy because she has to build a high effectiveness, and you really don't encounter these players very often at all. But she's one of the go-to like anti-high ER units basically. Specimen says, if you happen to pick some kind of stunner early, he is a decent unit. If you happen to pick Emo Sharon or like Arrow early, he's a decent unit. But otherwise, not really. Although I guess if you play Harsetti with Crown, he's also a decent unit. I guess. Last Rider Crow, I'm sure he'll get a glow up with his buff, but right now LRK. Last Rider Crow is very rarely a counter to A Tywin, cause like some people will pick A Tywin without picking a cleanser, and that's pretty much the only way he's used. Sorry. If they pick a Tywin without picking a stripper, then LK is decent. Biblis is an okay pick into Candy, although you can get screwed by RNG or lack of RNG, but typically she is a decent counter pick into Candy. Although you probably prefer not to pick her most of the time. But yeah, she's okay against Candy, but usually you won't have a slot to pick her because she's not really a DPS, she's just a debuffer. Blue Shoe, if you need a blue bruiser, Blue Shoe is like the premier blue bruiser. Not much to say. Very tanky, can do a lot of damage. Fire Ken. Okay, Fire Ken is actually, he's very menacing. He has a 100% defense break into a dual attack, which is unheard of. And if you pick him with Frida, Fire Ken Soul Burn actually goes wild. I actually think he's a decent unit if you play him with Frida. Then we have Remnant Violet. Hey, again, this unit, Remnant Violet with Frida is actually really strong. Like Soulburn Remnant Violet with the Violet Talisman, he stacks Violet Talisman so fast with Frida that it makes him much more reliable. And he actually does very menacing amounts of damage. So yeah, Remnant Violet, Firekin, they are accomplices of Frida basically. And oh whoops, I put Frida in cleave tier. Yeah, it pretty much, if you play Frida, you're like trying to cleave or whatever. And yeah, these units, they're very good with Frida. Solitary of the Snow. If you need anti-focus, she's the go-to, basically. If someone picked Sage Vivian way too earlier, boom, Solitaria. Maid Chloe. If you are an F-Res player, Maid Chloe is a decent unit. You know, she gives her whole team like 60 F-Res for free. Like, no big deal. She's a cleanse, she's an attack buff. She's decent if you build your team or if you build your units all around her. Emma Ken. Sometimes Emma Ken has potential to 1v4, but it's actually very hard. Like, usually he's just dying to counterattacks. Like, if you pick him against Candy or Yuffie, he's probably gonna die to their counterattacks. Let's be honest. But sometimes when the stars align, he can 1v4. SSV is kind of decent as a... She can actually cleanse pretty often. I think she's decent against Harsetti. Because, like, she can... Every time Harsetti takes a turn, SSB will counter and cleanse, basically, and potentially defense break. So that's kind of nice. Then we have Shooting Star Arcades. This is more of like a theory craft. But I've heard very good things about this unit. This unit, she gives someone 3 turns of immortality. And in this stupid immortality meta, if you have more immortalities than the other person, then you're gonna win. Let's say you're playing a clown game with like Amiki, BBK, Arbiter Vildred, and Genua, and like Abigail. if you pick a KDs and you just outlast them with your superior immortality, you kind of win. Yeah, she's a decent unit. Green Sharon. She's actually kind of decent against Amiki because of her cooldown reset. But that's about it. Archdemon. Archdemon is decent when the other person has many units that rely on passives. Basically. Otherwise, there's not much reason to pick her otherwise. And like, they have minimal cleansers too. And Benevolent Roman, he's actually... He's one of the only like counters to Emo Poly pretty much. As long as they don't have a Tywin, he's decent. Definitely decent against Emo Poly, but that's about it. Arrowell is definitely a fall from grace. Arrowell used to be picked very often, but now there's not much reason to pick her unless you want to like lead into like Specimen Says or something. Yeah, pretty much that's the only reason you would pick Arrowell. Like, if you want to pick a knight, it's always a Tywin, Albedo, or Crimson Armin, basically. But yeah, that is it for A tier. And we won't really be going over B tier because like these units, there's not much to say about them. They're inconsistent, they're unreliable, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. I hope it was helpful.